morning. Welcome. I'll wait a second as people join us here this morning. I'm Pastor Lou. I'm one of the pastors at First Church Melbourne, and we're in our Lenten Devotional series. And it's based on this book. And I'll say it again, if you haven't already, it's a fantastic book. Go get George Acevedo's Everybody Needs Some Cave Time. And he goes through these various caves that we experience. And he shares stories of Old Testament, New Testament characters who experience these various caves. So we've been through the cave of anger. We've talked about the cave of fear. He's going to talk about the cave of grief and depression. As we encounter these in our world today, we find things that are very helpful as we watch other characters in the Bible experience these. As they walk through, as it changes them and shapes them, as God works through that experience. And so, as I said, we're in the cave of fear, and it's focusing really on the person of David. And David's a pretty amazing story in Scripture. I encourage you to go check it out, read about his life, the ups and downs, the changes that happen through the life of David, how God moves through David's life. And really what God is doing to prepare not only David, but a people, a nation, what he's doing to prepare a path for what would come to be in the person of Jesus. And so we'll jump into this story, and there's a devotional every day during the week, Monday through Friday. So join us 7 o'clock here on Facebook, and we would love to interact with you. Join us on Sundays. And make sure you grab this book, because it is a fantastic read. And so today we're focusing on some verses out of 1 Samuel. And so we've experienced David. Now he's had some success. He was sort of the underdog. God found him, even though he was sort of hidden in his family. He was, the last one people thought about. He was elevated to this position of power and authority. He's got courage. He does amazing things in his life as he encounters dangerous situations. And in fact, as he's a shepherd, he's this unbelievably brave shepherd who protects his sheep. And then he becomes a soldier, and he has great success as he faces really unbelievable odds. And dangerous situations. And so he's achieved some power, he's achieved some authority, he's achieved some kind of notoriety, and now the king in which he serves under is experiencing problems with his ego, basically, his pride, whatever you want to call it. He's having trouble having someone underneath him that people are talking about, that there's a whole bunch of people that think David should be in charge. And so it creates some tension. And so what ends up happening, Saul's chasing David. He's trying to kill him. He thinks David's out to get him. And so David is fleeing. We see a various number of encounters where David is trying to survive. He's crying out to God. And so we find David in this cave, both physically, literally, but also metaphorically, as he's experiencing really difficult situations and trying to navigate what happens, and fear begins to creep into his life, and fear begins to change the way he encounters the world. And it's interesting, because fear is one of those things that I think in our lives it can be a good thing to be afraid of certain things, right? It's sort of how we're created. We're afraid of dangerous things, right? We have caution around things that may harm us, that situations that may be dangerous, and a little bit of that is good, but when it takes over, it becomes a problem. And I remember years ago when my wife Melissa and I first got married, we went out west, and it was beautiful. And one of the trips that we went on was to the Grand Canyon. And we went to the side of the Grand Canyon that really wasn't a big touristy area. It was didn't have the shops, didn't have the restaurants, all that kind of stuff. It was really just the Grand Canyon, which was beautiful. One of the things that was strange to me was there was literally no safety precautions whatsoever. There was no railing, there was no warning signs, there was no stairs or arm rails as you navigated this part of the Grand Canyon. And so I remember thinking, this is beautiful. It was amazing. We were there kind of as the sun was setting, the colors were changing. But every time I got close to the edge of the Grand Canyon, I began to get this feeling within me. And I'm positive it was fear, but it was this sense like, oh, this is dangerous. I should step away. I should back up. And I remember thinking, yeah, it's fine. Thousands of people come through here. And so we go a little bit further out, and we go to look, down into the Grand Canyon. And I remember just as I began to get a sense that, okay, this is all right. This is safe. We're in a good place. I looked down and flowing through that area was a pretty good portion of the Colorado rivers. You could see it. It's way down there. And I remember looking down and seeing a helicopter flying below me. And so I was looking down at the propeller blades, or the blades rotating. And remember, that was the moment I realized this was my experience was done. I saw what I needed to see, and I was going to back away from this encounter. And so fear began to creep in. And so in healthy ways, we're afraid of dangerous situations. But when it changes, when it overcomes every other sense that we have, it makes us do odd things. And so David, in the same way, he steps into dangerous situations. He encounters dangerous people. He fights as a warrior in situations that have a high risk, and yet he's able to kind of navigate fear. But as he enters this time where he's really being chased by the king, where he feels like his life is in danger, that he's going to be killed at any moment, he feels like everyone's out to get him, he begins to do things that he normally wouldn't do. And fear begins to creep in. And so he has this encounter with another king. He's hiding, he's trying to get away, and people begin to recognize him. And people begin to cheer and kind of have this saying about David, that Saul has done great things. Saul's killed many men, but David has killed many more. And it was sort of this chant of, here's this champion, this warrior, this great leader. And David hears this as he's about to encounter the king, and he decides out of fear that he's trying to get out of the situation altogether. He doesn't want to navigate it. And so this is what we find in 1 Samuel chapter 21. You can read the whole story here, but he encounters this king, and they're chanting, they're lifting up that he's this great leader, warrior, that he's supposed to be king. I mean, they're really pumping his ego up. And so David's encounter looks like this. It says, so David pretends to be insane. And he's scratching on doors, and he's drooling down his beard. And so his fear takes over to the point where he literally pretends to be a crazy person to try and get out of the situation. And so this king that encounters David sees him, and he's trying to connect the two things. That here you're telling me this is a great warrior, that this is greater than King Saul, that David is a person who's led great armies. He's going to do amazing things, that God is with him, and he's standing before me. He's drooling, he's scratching on doors, he's acting as if he's completely insane. And so for David, it works. The king says, get this person out of this place. Get him away from me. I don't want anything to do with this. We have enough crazy people here, and kind of boots him out the door. And so here David, he ends up doing things he normally wouldn't do because of fear. And in our lives, in our encounters, we end up doing things that we normally wouldn't do when fear begins to take over. When we really are unsure of how things are going to go, and it feels like we have no control, we begin to fear what's about to happen. Not only that, we begin to fear things that are really unlikely to happen. And George, in his book here, he shares a lot about his first encounter with the church, when he comes and he has this huge debt to overcome. There's no finances within the church. There's no vision. There's no direction. And he's sort of inherited really a difficult situation. And he finds himself kind of backing himself into a cave of fear. And we see this in David's life over and over again. And one of the interesting things that I think we see when we read the bigger picture is that God is doing a work in David's life. I would argue as well, God's doing a work in Saul's life. God's doing a work in this whole situation. But in the moment, it's easy to experience the fear and let that take over. And one of the things that someone shared with me, I'll read it to you about this encounter with David. It says this, that something has happened to David along the way. We read the full picture. When we first meet David in Samuel, he's brave, right? He's taken a club to kill a bear and a lion for the sake of the sheep. He does brave things in order to protect those he's in charge of. But it says by the end of the book, he's decided that the sheep should die for him. He's decided that those that he's been put in charge of, now not sheep, but an army, should die for him. And so by the end of the book, he's decided that this is it, that people are sheep, that they're expendable. He makes choices out of fear to really act this way towards what God has gifted him with, to protect, to care for. And so what we end up seeing, and this is the bigger picture, I think is really powerful, is that David will not be the good shepherd that will give his life for his sheep, and that we must keep looking, we must keep reading to find the one that will. And so David prepares the way for the Messiah, prepares the way for Jesus, the shepherd who will sacrifice himself for the sheep. And what does this say about the world we live? What does it say about the way fear creeps in our lives? What does it say about how when we get more authority, when we get more power, when we get more resources, how do we combat this idea of a growing fear? How can we look at the things that God has gifted us with, not as a thing to be afraid of losing, but a gift to be shared with those around us? David tries desperately to hold on. He refuses to surrender a lot of things in his life, and it leads to fear. He's afraid. He's afraid of dying. He's afraid of losing integrity. He's afraid of not being able to save face. He's afraid that people will think he's a phony. He's afraid that life will never get better. And we see this lament in David's life. But yet we know God continues to pour into the life of David, that David ends up doing amazing things, that David ends up leading a people, that he ends up creating a place, a pathway that we eventually find the Good Shepherd through. And so in your life today, I want to ask this question. So fear can make us do all kinds of crazy things. It can make us act out in strange ways. It can make us seem like we've lost our mind. It can remove us from community. It can create tension in relationships and all those things. And so the question is, what things has fear made you do that is out of your character? In what ways has fear changed you drastically? And in those things, what are some ways that you can be aware of the warning signs, so that when stress comes, when uncertainty arrives, when your ego is hurt, when you feel like there's no way out and fear begins to creep in, what are the ways in which you can stop that and surrender those things to God and realize that God is moving in powerful ways, that maybe in this moment things will be difficult, but God is still continuing to move, and there's hope for tomorrow. And so I hope this has been helpful. Come join us every week, every day this week, as we go through this and tackle this idea of fear. And I would encourage you, go read 1 Samuel. It's a pretty amazing read. We really get into the life of David and Saul and this encounter. We see the dynamic, and we really see David change. We see fear kind of take over in his life, and how God works through that. And so have a great week. It is good to be with you all, and I will see you all Sunday.